can the Canon EOS R1 track subjects even if their movement becomes obscured by something or if they temporarily exit the frame? A recent patent filing solves this issue by allowing the autofocus system to reacquire the subject without all that pulsing or jumping to another subject. Stick around after this short break for all the details. But first, subscribe to this channel for a chance to win a Canon EOS R5. I'll be giving one away to one lucky subscriber once this channel reaches 100,000 subscribers. Anyone above the age of 18 with a valid mailing address is eligible. Additional terms and conditions are linked in the description down below. While Canon's autofocus tracking is reliable and trustworthy and certainly considered one of the best, I'm sure you've been shooting in crowded situations when the autofocus system has trouble tracking your subject by locking onto somebody else or jumping around. Maybe you're shooting your son at karate, maybe you're shooting at an event where there's a crowd of people and you're trying to get it to lock focus on somebody special. Or maybe a big bus or truck goes by. Or perhaps you temporarily leave the frame but come back, and in the meantime the autofocus system has gone nuts. And after that, the autofocus system fails to reacquire the subject. Well, Japanese patent JP 2023-154-970A, published on October the 20th, 2023, explains how Canon has solved the problem of tracking subjects with higher accuracy by associating the object with a moving track for shooting video. As the patent was filed back in April of 2022, could Canon have applied this autofocus logic to the upcoming Canon EOS R1, or perhaps even the Canon EOS R5 Mark II? The patent explains subject tracking is Canon's current technique for acquiring a subject's movement trajectory for video recording, but the current implementation of subject tracking loses focus when the subject's movement trajectory is interrupted, such as a person is hidden for a long time or the person goes out of the frame. Once this happens, the camera is unable to reacquire the subject. The patent filing does go on for a long time in excruciating detail, with diagrams explaining how Canon has solved the problem by integrating multiple movement trajectories. All this is done in camera, but can also be applied to networked cameras. Essentially, it's by integrating these different movement trajectories that the camera is able to do some calculations based on some complex algorithms to essentially reacquire the subject once the subject comes back into the frame or is no longer obscured instead of pulsing or jumping around. And while the patent is hard to follow, I want to draw out one more clause for you. Specifically, a clustering method is introduced under the assumption that the integration of the movement trajectories in the camera is correctly performed, and that a restriction based on the movement trajectories can determine the person being tracked and allow it to reacquire the subject. If the machine-translated Japanese patent legalese doesn't give you a headache, then go ahead and send me your resume. But essentially what this patent does is, as I stated at the beginning, it improves autofocus tracking of moving subjects for video shooters. And what this means is if you're shooting in a crowded situation and you're locked onto your subject, you tap on your subject, it's following your subject, then all of a sudden somebody bigger comes into the frame, or they walk between a pole or something, or a bus comes by and obscures them, then what the autofocus system can do is anything but be patient and wait for that subject so they can reacquire it. Well, this patent application solves that, reacquiring the subject without the autofocus system bouncing around. When the trajectory is broken by the subject either going out of frame or hidden by something in the frame, instead of hunting around, the focus is held until the subject reappears. In fact, the camera actually anticipates the subject's reappearance without any sort of jerkiness in the focus system. How many times have I complained on this channel about Canon's autofocus system when it comes to tracking subjects in crowded situations or where there's lots of objects, where the subject temporarily leaves the frame or the subject becomes obscured by somebody else. Canon does have one of the best autofocus systems for stills hybrid cameras, right up there with Sony, but there are certain situations, such as I'm filming my son at karate, where he's going for his next belt, and in this case he's studying for his green belt. He's doing his coda, but as soon as he's hidden by another child or another child comes in front of him, the autofocus system says, oh wait, somebody else, let's go ahead and start tracking this person. There's no stickiness, and that's really what I would like to see. Over the past couple of months, I've highlighted several patent filing applications that talked about improving the autofocus system, the accuracy, the reliability, and of course, in this case, the stickiness of the autofocus system of the subject, predicting its movement trajectory, so that way it can hold the autofocus point, not jump off onto something else, and then reacquire the subject, whether they move out of the frame or not, or whether they're hidden. And I think that's a big deal. But what's even more important here, and the reason why I'm tying this to the Canon EOS R1 and the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, is all these patents, these aren't rumors. This is actually research and development effort that's taken place at Canon Labs over the past several years. And for these enhancements, these improvements to the autofocus system, for the autofocus tracking system, not to show up in the Canon EOS R1 or the Canon EOS R5, to me would be a big surprise. And it's not just me. Canon Rumors has stated that we've been told that Canon has impressively improved iris tracking autofocus point selection, and that we should expect the usual improvements in overall autofocus performance. There's no surprise. The Canon EOS R1 is Canon's flagship mirrorless camera. It's not out right now, but it's going to be announced next year. This happens every single time the Olympics come. Canon releases a new 1 series camera in time for the Olympics. So we are told by Canon Rumors that probably sometime in the first quarter, Canon's going to start or come out with some sort of announcement, maybe a teaser video or maybe a development announcement, and start a slow ramp up announcing the Canon EOS R1. And they're not going to do this for some just minor update, like they did for the Canon EOS R3, a kind of a minor update over the 1DX Mark III, lots of general improvements, but there was no leaked rumors, there was no leaked images, there was no even development announcement. Just one night, all of a sudden, there it was, the Canon EOS R3. Now, the R1 is going to get a lot of play, and Canon's going to do that only if they feel that they have a very big announcement, that they're coming out with a camera that they themselves are significantly proud of. Engineers want to leak information. Everybody connected to this can't wait to see our responses because it's going to be a big deal. And to see improvements in the autofocus system, the eye tracking that we see or the eye controlled autofocus that we see with the Canon EOS R3 is going to be improved with the R1, but so is autofocus accuracy and all sorts of other capabilities, such as what we've talked about in this patent filing, being able to reacquire the subject. But I think a big part of this, the improvements we're going to see in the autofocus system for the Canon EOS R1 and the Canon EOS R5, is going to be how Canon implements the artificial intelligence capability of deep learning, because I think there's going to be an AI element here, because when I'm shooting, and maybe it's the same for you, but when I'm shooting, when I'm looking through, I know inherently that I'm tracking my son or whatever subject I'm tracking, and I just know, and when somebody else goes in front of them, I know to not start hunting around, and we need the camera to start thinking like a person, to start thinking like an artificial intelligence would, to start tracking that subject. And if they become obscured, take a deep breath, Canon, don't jump around, don't pulse, don't do all sorts of any other things, just stay where you are. You can see they're moving, or you can see the other subjects moving, you can see different movement trajectories, and either you hold the subject or you just adjust the focus a little bit to where you know they're going to be. And I think that's a really big deal, and I can't wait to see the Canon EOS R1. I can't wait to get more leaked specifications of both of these two cameras, the R5 replacement, the EOS R1. Oh, it's starting to get exciting. Like, how many videos have we put out on the Canon EOS R1, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II in just the month of October alone? And I think that's going to start to accelerate in the month of November and maybe even December, before we have some sort of announcement for the Canon EOS R1 in the first quarter, January, February, or March. And we're supposed to be getting an actual announcement of the Canon EOS R5 Mark II in the days and weeks, well, not the weeks, in the days before CP+, which is going to be held in Japan this year. Well, it's held in Japan every year in the month of February, probably sometime around the 22nd, I believe. Well, look at this graphic right here. So CP+ is most likely where we're going to get to see the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. So if you want to stay up to date on all the latest camera gear, news, and rumors, specifically the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, the Canon EOS R1, subscribe and choose all notifications, because this is the channel where you're likely going to hear it before anywhere else. And by subscribing, it also helps this channel grow. Look at the number right there. If you're watching this I'm probably just before 45,000 subscribers. I've been doing this channel for about 4 years. I think it's going on 5 now, if you can believe that. 5 years I've been doing this, and I'm just on the verge of 45,000 subscribers. So please, by subscribing, it really does help this channel grow. It gets this channel noticed. It feeds that YouTube formula. And it's not just by subscribing. If you happen to comment or like or dislike, all that stuff is engagement, and that's what YouTube's looking for.